a little boy gave a rescue signal to a Mafia boss that night outside the restaurant. Then everything changed. November rain hammered Los Angeles like bullets on steel, neon signs bleeding red and blue across black puddles, the cold cutting through fabric and skin alike. The streets were empty except for the sound of water hammering against asphalt, against awnings, against the windows of Moretti's upscale Italian restaurant where chandeliers cast golden light onto mahogany and marble. Cassandra Pierce stood under the awning, shivering in a soaked jacket that had stopped keeping out rain somewhere around 2 miles back. Her backpack pressed against her chest like armor, like maybe if she held it tight enough, nothing else could break. One eye was swollen completely shut, purple-black in the neon glow. Handprint bruises circled her throat like a necklace she never chose to wear. She was watching through the rain-streaked glass because she had nowhere else to go. Inside, a small boy sat alone in a back booth picking at pasta. Maybe 6 years old. Dark eyes that seemed too old for his face. Giovanni Moretti's men in black suits scattered throughout the dining room, their shoulders broad, their hands resting on the table with the casual confidence of people who had never been told no. The boy looked up. Locked eyes with her through the glass. Then Oliver did something that stopped her heart. He pressed his small hand flat against the window, spread his fingers wide, and opened his mouth. One word. She could read his lips even through the rain, even with only one eye that could see properly. Help! Cassandra's breath caught in her throat because she knew that look. That silent scream. The way a child learns to ask for rescue when speaking out loud becomes dangerous. She did not know who this child was or why he was surrounded by men who wore violence like cologne. But she knew this. She knew it the way you know your own name. The boy pressed both hands flat against the glass now. His small face was crumpling. His fingers spread and pressing and desperate. Giovanni Moretti emerged from the kitchen entrance then, tall and commanding in a black suit that cost more than everything Cassandra had ever owned. 6'2". Broad shoulders. Dark hair with silver threading through at the temples like a storm waiting to break. He moved like a man who owned the space around him, each step deliberate, each gesture controlled. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, white and thin like a blade had once tried to split his face in half. He was speaking in low tones to Vinny and Sal, his voice deep and solid like an oath, and he had not yet noticed her. But what she did not know was that this moment, this single choice to respond to a child's silent signal, would make her family to a man who trusted no one. What she did not know was that her decision to step through that restaurant door would bring the full weight of his vengeance upon those who had broken her. Giovanni turned then and saw her. Truly saw her. His eyes went very still. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning. To 48 hours earlier. To when Cassandra Pierce still had a place to sleep and did not yet know that carrying only $2 could lead to salvation. 2 days before that November night, before the rain and the restaurant and the boy's silent cry, Cassandra was counting coins at 4 in the morning in a studio apartment that smelled like mold and broken dreams. The apartment was on Figueroa Street in a building where the plumbing screamed at night and the neighbors solved their problems with fists and shouting. Her landlord's foreclosure notice sat on the kitchen table, corners curled, the words printed in official black type that left no room for hope. 14 days. That was the number that mattered. 14 days to find $150,000 or lose the apartment that was barely worth losing. She had $2.17 in her wallet. $2. The coins were mostly pennies. She was sorting them by denomination, a habit from childhood when her mother had made money gains into magic, turning copper into possibility through sheer force of will, when her phone buzzed on the table. The screen flashed with a text from her shift manager at Rose's Diner across town. "Can you pick up the closing shift tonight?" Tina called out. Cassandra's fingers went to her neck, where bruises were still blooming under her collar. 48 hours old now. They had moved from angry red to this poison purple, like flowers in soil made of pain. She pulled her shirt higher to cover them. She texted back, yes. What choice did she have? Rent was due. Medical bills from the surgery 2 years ago were still collecting interest like a debt that would outlive her. The foreclosure notice was not a suggestion. It was a countdown to nothing. She dressed in the dark because electricity was expensive and she had learned to move through her apartment without light. Black pants. White shirt. The waitress uniform that had become her whole identity. In the mirror, a small, cracked thing she kept on the dresser, she looked like a ghost. A woman who had already started disappearing. The bus ride to the diner took 34 minutes. She knew because she rode it every morning at the same time, watching the same neighborhoods transform from sleeping to waking, watching people move through their days with the kind of purpose she could not remember feeling. At Rose's diner, the coffee was black and burning hot, the pie was made fresh, and the tips were terrible. She worked the closing shift anyway. From 8 at night until 3 in the morning, she moved between tables like a machine, like a perfectly programmed device with no internal voice telling her to stop. Her feet developed blisters. A regular named Frank stiffed her on a $40 check. An older woman left her a quarter, and Cassandra felt tears come up hot and fast because a quarter meant that someone saw her. That someone, for whatever reason, acknowledged that she existed. By the time she clocked out at 3:15 in the morning, her shift manager, a man named Derek with kind eyes and his own problems, pressed an extra 20 into her hand. For walking home in the dark, he said. $20. With what she already had, that made $22.17. Enough for another week of instant noodles. Enough to maybe not starve. Not enough to stop the countdown on 14 days. The walk home took her through streets that belonged to the city's nighttime residents. People who sold things in the shadows. People who bought them. People like her, moving through the dark because they had nowhere else to go. It was during this walk, 6 blocks from her apartment, that the black SUV pulled up beside her. The window rolled down slow. A man in a tailored suit leaned out, his face angular and cruel, his eyes the color of wet concrete. Behind him sat a woman with blonde hair pulled back so tight her eyebrows were stretched toward her temples. She wore diamonds at her ears. She wore the kind of smile that belonged to someone used to winning. Cassandra Pierce, the man said. His voice dripped like venom. Her stomach went cold. No one knew her name. No one ever called her by her full name. People called her waitress or youth or nothing at all. She started. Catherine Mercer sent us, the woman said from inside the car. She wants to talk to you about your daughter. Time stopped. The entire world compressed into those 5 words. Cassandra had a daughter. Emma. She was 5 years old. She lived with Cassandra's sister in Nevada because Cassandra could not afford to keep her here, could not afford food and housing and childcare on minimum wage and tips. Emma had been 2 years old when Cassandra made the decision to let her sister take her, just for a little while, just until she got back on her feet. Emma was now 5. Where is she? Cassandra's voice came out shattered like glass. Safe, the man said. For now. Get in the car. Cassandra did not get in the car. What she did instead was turn and run. Down Figueroa Street, past the closed storefronts and the sleeping homeless people and the neon signs that flickered like dying eyes. Behind her, she could hear the SUV's engine roaring, tires grinding on asphalt. She ran until her lungs burned. She ran until she could not hear the engine anymore. She ran until she found herself at Moretti's restaurant, the windows glowing gold and warm, the place looking less like a Mafia front and more like a sanctuary. She pressed herself under the awning to catch her breath, shaking like a caught animal, wondering if they would come back for her. And that is when the boy appeared on the other side of the glass. Oliver? His small hand flat against the window. His mouth forming that single word that would change everything. Help! The Honda Civic was cold. November had turned the pre-dawn air into something sharp and metallic, and Cassandra Pierce's breath came out in small clouds against the windshield. She lay curled in the back seat, her neck bent at an angle that made her spine scream, her body folded like origami into a space never designed for sleeping. Outside, the closed shopping center loomed dark and empty. Inside, she was alone with the sound of her own shallow breathing. She had slept here for 47 nights. She knew this because she had been counting. Cassandra's eyes opened to grey light. Wednesday morning. The foreclosure notice was still on the passenger seat where she had left it the night before, the paper so creased and folded that it was beginning to tear at the edges. She did not need to read it again. She had memorized every word the moment the notice was served 6 months ago. Property seizure in 14 days unless $150,000 is paid in full to Marchetti Property Management. Signed Anthony Marchetti. $150,000. She had too. Cassandra sat up slowly, her muscles protesting with a pain so familiar it felt like an old friend. She reached for her wallet from the cup holder where it sat like a condemned prisoner. Inside, 2 single-dollar bills. That was all. 48 hours ago she had held for dollars. A woman at the diner had ordered coffee and left before paying, and Cassandra had made a choice, use the $4 to buy food or save them for gas. She had chosen gas. The diner was 5 miles away. Without gas, she could not get there. Without the diner, she could not eat. The math was simple. She was losing. 3 blocks from the closed shopping center, there was a gas station. Cassandra had walked this route enough times that her feet knew the way without her mind having to participate. The fluorescent lights inside the station were harsh and revealing, the kind of lighting that made every imperfection visible. She could feel the attendant's eyes on her as she moved toward the bathroom, could hear the subtle shift in his posture that meant he was thinking about stopping her. She had learned to move quickly, to become invisible before anyone decided to make her leave. The bathroom was filthy. The mirror was cracked, showing her back in fragments. This was good. Cassandra did not like seeing her full reflection anymore. In the pieces, she could pretend the exhaustion was less severe, the hollowness in her cheeks less pronounced. She ran cold water and washed her face and armpits with paper towels and hand soap that smelled like plastic. She changed into her only clean shirt, a gray long-sleeve she had washed 2 nights ago in a gas station sink in Pasadena. Her toothbrush was frayed at the edges. She brushed her teeth over the grimy sink, watching the foam swirl gray. The attendant banged on the door. "This is not a hotel. Move it." She did not respond. She had learned that engaging only made things worse. Everything she owned in the world fit inside a single backpack. 2 changes of clothes. A toothbrush. A photograph of her mother, taken 30 years ago when her mother was still alive and before Cassandra was born into a version of the world that had never been designed to hold her. The foreclosure notice. A phone that had not had service in 8 months. A 23-year-old library card. Nothing of value. Nothing that could save her. 40 miles away, in a glass tower overlooking downtown Los Angeles, Anthony Marchetti sat at a desk made of marble and obsidian, and he was laughing. He was 45 years old but moved through the world with the ease of a man who had never been told no. His suit cost more than Cassandra's car. His watch cost more than 6 months of her old rent. His hair was silver at the temples in a way that suggested sophistication rather than age. He sat across from Catherine Mercer, a woman of 53 who wore her wealth like armor. Platinum blonde hair cut in a way that cost $800. Cheekbones that had been sharpened with the help of surgeons. Eyes that had gone cold somewhere around her 40th birthday and never warmed again. They were reviewing a tablet showing photographs of properties. Buildings. Blocks. Futures that belonged to other people. Catherine's finger tapped one address. "This one," she said. Her voice was smooth and controlled, a voice that had learned how to wound without raising volume. "Cassandra Pierce. Still hasn't signed the building over. We need that block for the development deal. 20 million rides on clearing that property. I want it empty by month's end." Marchetti smiled. It was not a smile that reached his eyes. "She will sign. They always do. I have methods." He pulled up other photographs on the tablet. Other addresses. Other names that did not matter anymore because he had erased them. He described the process with the detached pleasure of a chef discussing his recipes. Health code violations fabricated and filed. Building inspectors paid off with cash that left no trail. Gas leaks that might have existed but probably had not. Electrical problems that appeared and disappeared on paperwork. Heat that was shut off in winter. Mold that was allowed to bloom. He had perfected the art of making places unlivable without leaving fingerprints. He had perfected the art of breaking people who could not afford lawyers. Catherine nodded. Whatever it takes, Anthony. That property must be empty. Marchetti leaned back in his chair. He already owned Cassandra Pierce's building. The old woman who had lived there before her had signed over the deed under pressure that looked nothing like pressure if you did not look too closely. Now the building was his. Now Cassandra was his problem. Now she was his project. He had a gift for projects that involved destroying people who had nothing left to lose. Thursday afternoon, the kitchen at Martina's Diner was a place where time moved differently. Hours stretched like taffy. Cassandra stood at the sink, her hand submerged in water so hot it made her skin red, washing dishes from the lunch rush. For hours of work. She would be paid $28. Cash, under the table, which meant no record, which meant it was the only kind of work that would hire her anymore. She had not eaten since Wednesday morning. That was 34 hours ago. The cook, a man named Diego who had learned to look away from her desperation, set a plate beside the sink. Cold fries. Half a burger someone had sent back. The plate appeared like a small miracle and disappeared into her hands just as quickly. She ate standing over the sink, between loads of dishes, her hands moving from water to food to water again, efficient and practiced. The burger was dry and the fries were congealed with old grease, but she did not taste it. She never tasted anything anymore. When you are hungry enough, food becomes fuel. You stop thinking about taste. You stop thinking about anything except the mechanics of keeping your body alive one more day. That night, she returned to the Civic. The temperature had dropped. She was reaching for the door handle when she saw him. Anthony Marchetti stood with his body leaning against her car like he owned it, which he did, which he owned everything, and beside him stood two men in cheap suits whose job was to make it clear that questions were not welcome. Marchetti smiled when he saw her. It was the same smile he had worn in the photograph at his office. It was a smile that had destroyed lives. "Hello, Cassandra." She did not respond. She had learned that speaking only prolonged things. "I wanted you to know that the 14 days has become 7, he said. His voice was smooth, conversational, the voice of a man discussing the weather. "The eviction has been expedited. You will be out of that building by Tuesday of next week." She tried to walk past him. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm. His fingers were warm. His grip was precise. He squeezed until she gasped. "You could make this go away," he said. She could smell his cologne. She could smell money. "You know what I want. Come upstairs to my office. We can work out an arrangement. You are a reasonable woman. You understand how things work." She jerked her arm free. The movement surprised both of them. "I will find the money," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she had intended. "I will find a way." Marchetti laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. "You have been saying that for 6 months. You have nothing. You are nothing. An eviction notice will follow you for 7 years. No one will rent to you. No one will hire you. You will be living in this car for the rest of your life unless you accept my help." The two men stepped closer. They did not say anything. They did not need to. She turned and walked away. She could feel his eyes on her back as she moved. She could feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing, like something pressing down on her spine. She did not look back. She had learned that looking back was dangerous. Looking back meant hesitation. Hesitation meant they could change their mind and grab you again. She walked until she reached the bus stop, then walked some more, until the night swallowed her up and she became just another invisible person moving through the city. Just another ghost that people looked through instead of at. But what Cassandra did not know, as she moved through those dark streets, was that Anthony Marchetti had spent the last 6 months learning her schedule, her routes, her weaknesses. He had learned that she had a daughter, Emma, 5 years old, living 300 miles away in Nevada with an older sister who was raising her because Cassandra could not afford to keep her. He had learned everything because powerful men who decide to destroy you do not stop at surface-level damage. They dig down. They find the things you love most. They weaponize your hope. He had already planned his next move. He had already set the machinery in motion. What was coming would break her in ways she had not yet imagined. The November rain fell like a curse that could not be erased, cold and relentless, soaking through the fabric of Cassandra Pierce's jacket until it clung to her skin like a second layer of suffering. She huddled in the doorway 3 blocks from Moretti's restaurant, her body folded in on itself, trying to disappear into the brick wall behind her. Her left eye was swollen shut, the skin around it blooming purple and black. Her throat bore the clear imprint of fingers, 5 of them, pressed deep into her neck like a signature of violence. 2 hours ago, Anthony Marchetti had found her in a parking garage. He had slammed her against concrete, wrapped his hands around her windpipe, and squeezed until black spots danced across her vision and she could not breathe. 3 days, he had whispered against her ear. 3 days left and then I take everything. Including her. She had stumbled away when his phone rang. Now she had nowhere to go. The Civic was 10 blocks away, parked on a side street, locked and cold. She had no money for a shelter bed. The $2 in her pocket, that was all she had in the world, all that remained of everything her mother had left her, would not stretch far enough. Her teeth chattered so hard she thought they might crack. She dragged herself toward the warm light spilling from the restaurant windows, moving like a wounded animal seeking shelter. The awning offered thin protection from the downpour. She pressed against the building, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Through the glass, she could see an upscale Italian restaurant alive with warmth and candlelight. Exposed brick walls. Edison bulbs hanging like tiny suns from the ceiling. White tablecloths. Red votive candles casting dancing shadows across the faces of well-dressed diners who seemed to belong to a different world entirely. The scent of garlic and basil and wood-fired pizza drifted through the cracked door. In a private booth in the back, a small boy sat alone. He looked to be about 6 years old, with dark curly hair and skin the color of olive wood. He wore a button-down shirt, navy blue, pressed and perfect. He pushed pasta around his plate with mechanical precision, moving the food from one side to the other without lifting any to his mouth. Around him stood men in dark suits, their hands resting near their waists, their eyes constantly scanning the room. These men did not acknowledge the child. They looked through him the way most people looked through Cassandra, as though he did not quite exist. Then a man emerged from near the kitchen. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvered at the temples. He wore a suit that cost more than everything Cassandra had owned in her entire life, charcoal grey wool, tailored to fit his frame like a second skin, white shirt unbuttoned at the throat showing the hard line of his chest. A gold watch caught the light on his left wrist. Scars ran from his right eye to his cheekbone like a blade's path. When he moved, every eye in the restaurant shifted toward him without his demanding it. This was Giovanni Moretti. Power moved with him the way smoke moves through air, invisible but undeniable. He stood near the kitchen, speaking quietly with 2 men, his presence filling the space like gravity. And then Oliver looked up. His eyes, dark and desperate, found Cassandra's through the restaurant window. For a moment neither of them moved. She saw something crack open in that child's face, recognition, a terrible understanding, the look of someone drowning. His small fingers spread against the glass. His lips moved. He mouthed a single word, clear as prayer. Help! Cassandra's heart stopped. She knew that signal. She had used it herself when she was 7 years old, when her stepfather locked her in the basement for talking back, for not moving fast enough, for existing in a way that displeased him. She would press her face to the small basement window and spread her fingers and mouth silent pleas to neighbors passing on the sidewalk. Most ignored her. Most looked through her the way these men were looking through Oliver, as though invisible children were simply part of the landscape. One woman finally called the police. That signal had saved her life. She could not ignore it now. Giovanni turned, following his son's gaze to the window. His expression did not change, but his body went absolutely still. That kind of stillness was more dangerous than movement. Vinny stepped toward the door, his hand moving automatically toward his jacket. Giovanni raised one hand without looking away from the window. "Stop. Let me handle this." He walked to the entrance without an umbrella, stepping directly into the November rain. Cassandra tried to back away, but her legs buckled. The cold and hunger and terror had finally caught up with her. She slid down the building wall until she was sitting on the wet concrete. Giovanni did not touch her. He kept 3 feet of distance, respecting some boundary he understood without explanation. His voice was like gravel being crushed under weight. "Who hurt you?" She shook her head. It did not matter. She was just leaving. She was always just leaving. That was her entire life now, one long series of departures from places that were never meant to hold her. But Oliver appeared in the restaurant doorway behind his father. The boy slipped past him without hesitation and walked straight to Cassandra sitting on the wet ground. His small fingers reached out. He took her hand in his, and his grip was surprisingly strong for someone so small. He looked up at her with eyes that held the same drowning desperation she had seen in her own reflection 1,000 times. "Mama," he said clearly. "Come inside." "Mama." The word hung in the November air between them like a gunshot in silence. Giovanni froze. Cassandra froze. The boy refused to let go of her hand. His fingers tightened around hers as though he feared she might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. In the doorway, Vinny exchanged a look with Sal that neither had witnessed in 15 years of working for Giovanni Moretti. In 15 years, they had never heard him step outside his restaurant for a stranger. In 15 years, they had never seen his son speak more than a few words to anyone. But Giovanni was already helping Cassandra to her feet, one hand beneath her elbow, supporting her weight as her legs threatened to give way again. Oliver kept her other hand locked in his own. Together they moved inside, away from the rain, into the warmth and light and safety of a world Cassandra had never been allowed to enter. Giovanni led them to the private booth in the back, the one where empires were built and destroyed in whispered conversations. He gestured for her to sit. She collapsed into the leather seat, Oliver sliding in beside her immediately, their hands still joined. Giovanni sat across from them, his dark eyes moving across her face, cataloguing each bruise, each mark, the way her entire body trembled. Vinny and Sal hovered nearby, confusion and disbelief etched into their features. Giovanni snapped his fingers once. The gesture was subtle but absolute. "Food. Now. Everything." The waiter appeared immediately. Giovanni ordered minestrone soup, fresh bread still warm from the oven, chicken parmesan, pasta carbonara, water, wine, a chocolate cake he pointed to in a display case near the kitchen. Cassandra tried to protest that she had no money, that she could not possibly accept this. Giovanni did not even look at her when he answered. "When did you last eat?" She could not remember. Yesterday? The day before? Time had become a blur of hunger and cold and desperation. The food arrived and she tried to eat slowly, tried to maintain some dignity, but her hands shook and she devoured half the soup in minutes, the hot liquid burning her throat but filling a void so deep she thought she might never reach the bottom of it. Oliver watched her in silence, then pushed his plate of pasta across the table toward her. "You can have mine," he said. She started crying. She did not mean to. She had learned years ago that crying accomplished nothing, that tears were a luxury people like her could not afford. But the combination of warmth and food and a child's kindness broke something inside her that she had been holding together through sheer force of will. Tears streamed down her face. She tried to hide them, but they came anyway, unstoppable, like a dam giving way. Giovanni signaled the waiter to bring more food. Vinny leaned toward Sal, his voice barely audible. In 15 years I have never seen him like this. Never. Sal did not respond. He was watching Giovanni study Cassandra the way a man might study a puzzle he was determined to solve, or perhaps the way a man studies his own reflection and finally recognizes himself. Giovanni asked her name. She told him, Cassandra Pierce. He asked who hurt her. She said it did not matter, she could handle it. His eyes darkened with something that looked like anger, though the anger was not directed at her. That is not what I asked. She hesitated, then the words poured out like they had been damming up inside her for months. Anthony Marchetti. A landlord. He owned the building where she lived until 2 months ago. She fell behind on rent after losing her job at the diner. The owner said she was not friendly enough with customers, that her bruises were bad for the restaurant's image. Marchetti offered to forget the debt if she would spend a night with him. She refused. He evicted her anyway. Then came the lawsuit. Back rent plus fees plus penalties, he claimed. $150,000. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The court sided with him. The foreclosure notice arrived 2 weeks ago, crumpled and final. 14 days to pay the impossible amount or lose the property her mother had left her, the only thing she had left in this world, the last proof that she had ever been loved. She pulled out the notice, her hand shaking so badly the paper rattled like wind chimes. Giovanni took it from her and read it slowly. His jaw tightened. His knuckles went white. Why would he pursue this? The numbers do not add. She explained, the neighborhood was being developed. Luxury condos rising block by block. Marchetti wanted the entire block for his project. She was the last holdout. The last person refusing to sell. If she lost the building, he could demolish and develop. She was the only thing standing between him and millions of dollars. Giovanni set the notice down carefully on the table, and in that gesture was the weight of a decision being made. How much do you have? She whispered it, $2. That is all I have in the world. $2. That is everything. Oliver leaned against her shoulder, his small body warm and trusting. Giovanni studied her for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and absolute. You will not lose this building. I will handle it. She tried to protest. She could not accept this. She had no way to repay him. He interrupted her, his tone leaving no room for argument. It is already done. What happened next was the restaurant door opening and Catherine Mercer stepping inside, designer coat fitted perfectly to her narrow frame, heels clicking against the hardwood floor like the ticking of a clock counting down to something terrible. Catherine was a regular here, the sort of woman who knew Giovanni socially, who understood the mechanics of power in this city. She saw Cassandra in Giovanni's private booth and her entire expression shifted, like clouds moving across the sun. She approached their table. Giovanni, darling, I did not expect to see you tonight. Her gaze slid to Cassandra, assessing, calculating, dismissing all in a single glance. And who is your friend? A guest, Giovanni said. His voice was ice. Catherine's smile was poison. She looks familiar. Are you Cassandra Pierce? The woman squatting in that condemned building on 5th Street? I have seen the reports. Quite the situation. Anthony has been more than patient with you, dear. You really should sign the release and move on. Holding up progress for pride is foolish. Some people simply do not understand their place. Giovanni stood. His movement was slow and deliberate, the way a predator rises before striking. Catherine. Leave. Excuse me? Leave my restaurant. Now. Catherine's face flushed with humiliation and fury. But before she could respond, Vinny and Sal stepped forward, their hands resting openly near their waists. The message was unmistakable. Catherine left, her heels clicking too fast against the floor. Cassandra was shaking. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to cause trouble. I should go." Giovanni sat back down across from her, and when he looked at her, something in his eyes had changed. Something had shifted from calculation to something far more dangerous. "You are not going anywhere?" He asked about Oliver's signal. Why had she responded to the window? She told him, "When I was 7, my stepfather locked me in the basement when I misbehaved. I learned to signal through the window to neighbors. Most ignored me. One woman finally called the police. That signal saved my life. When I saw your son do the same thing tonight, I could not ignore it." Giovanni was silent for a long moment. His eyes moved to Oliver, who was holding Cassandra's hand, refusing to let go. "His mother died 6 months ago," Giovanni said finally. "Car accident. Since then he does not speak much. Does not connect with anyone. Tonight he called you Mama. He has not said that word since the funeral. Why you?" Cassandra shook her head. "I do not know. Maybe he saw someone who needed help and it made him feel less alone. Children understand brokenness. They recognize it in each other." Giovanni leaned forward. "I understand betrayal. My brother, my only brother, Marco, sold our family to a rival organization 5 years ago. Gave them routes, contacts, schedules. 12 of my men died in the ambush. I had to choose between mercy and survival. I chose survival. Mercy costs everything in my world. I learned that lesson thoroughly." He paused, his eyes moving between Cassandra and Oliver. "But my son is teaching me something different. He sees something in you. And I trust his instincts more than my own." Cassandra asked the question that had been burning inside her since she walked into this restaurant. "Why would you help me? I am nobody. I have nothing. I cannot pay you back." Giovanni leaned across the table. "You stood in the rain with your face beaten and still responded to a child's cry for help. That is not nobody. That is everything. Oliver has not smiled in 6 months. Tonight he held your hand. You are already family." "I do not understand," she whispered. He explained, "In my world, family is not blood. It is choice. My son chose you. Therefore I chose you." What she did not understand yet was that Giovanni had already sent Sal to gather information on Anthony Marchetti and Catherine Mercer. And when Giovanni decided someone had harmed his family, that person's days were numbered in hours, not years. The machinery of his world was already turning. The clock was counting down. And neither Marchetti nor Catherine Mercer yet understood that their world was about to collapse entirely. The November rain falls like needles against Cassandra's skin as she stands outside the building where her mother died. The foreclosure notice in her pocket is soaked through, the numbers running together like tears. Anthony Marchetti towers above her, his expensive suit pristine despite the weather, Catherine Mercer at his shoulder with a smile that cuts deeper than any blade. Marchetti's voice drips with venom. "There you are. We have been looking for you. Heard you made some interesting friends last night." Catherine steps forward, her heels clicking against wet pavement. "Did you think running to Giovanni Moretti would save you? How embarrassing. A desperate woman throwing herself at a powerful man. People are already talking, Cassandra. I have made sure of it." Cassandra's throat tightens. The bruises on her arm from last night's beating pulse with fresh pain. Marchetti continues, his tone almost conversational. "You have 9 days left. But I am feeling generous. Sign the building over right now, and I will forget the debt. Refuse, and I will make sure everyone knows what you are. A homeless whore trying to trap a mafia boss through his child." Catherine laughs, "That sounds like breaking glass. By Monday your face will be on every gossip site in Los Angeles. Your picture beside words like unstable, manipulative, gold digger." The rain intensifies. Cassandra's hands shake as Marchetti grabs her arm, twisting it until she cries out, the same arm he broke in his building 2 nights ago. The pain is white-hot, pure. You will find nothing, Marchetti whispers, his face close to hers. You are nothing. Sign the papers. His men move closer, boxing her in. The building at her back, the only thing she has left, the last piece of her mother's memory, feels like it is being torn from her soul even before she signs anything. Cassandra reaches for the pen. Her hand trembles. The ink is already touching the page when a sound cuts through the rain. Engines. Multiple engines, moving in perfect coordination. 12 black SUVs pull into the street simultaneously, emerging from the rain like a nightmare-made manifest. The doors open with mechanical precision. 12 men in suits step out, their movements choreographed through years of practice. Vinny and Sal lead them, their faces carved from stone. Giovanni Moretti exits the final vehicle, perfectly dry beneath a black umbrella that costs more than Cassandra's entire yearly rent. His dark eyes move across the scene with the calculation of a general surveying a battlefield. He walks toward Cassandra without hurrying, each step deliberate, controlled, the rain parting around him like he commands the very sky. When he reaches her, his hands gentle on her shoulders, his voice is soft enough to barely carry over the downpour. I told you to stay inside. Cassandra whispers, I am sorry. Never apologize for being brave, he says. Then he turns to Marchetti, and the temperature drops another 10 degrees. The air itself seems to freeze solid. Giovanni's voice comes out quiet, measured, more terrifying for its softness. You put your hands on someone under my protection. That was your first mistake. Catherine tries to intercede, her voice sharp. Giovanni, this is a business matter between Anthony and Miss Pierce. It does not concern you. Giovanni does not even glance at her. It became my concern when you walked into my restaurant and disrespected my guest. When you launched a public campaign to destroy her name. When your partner left bruises on her throat. He steps closer to Marchetti until they are separated by less than a foot. You like leverage, Anthony? You like using people's desperation against them? Let me show you what real leverage looks like. Giovanni makes a single phone call. His voice is so quiet Cassandra can barely hear it. Transfer the documents to the federal agents. Now. Within 2 hours, federal agents swarm Marchetti Property Management. Documents Sal obtained days earlier, fraud, bribery, extortion, money laundering across 47 properties, are delivered to the FBI's Los Angeles field office. Marchetti's assets are frozen by 3 o'clock that afternoon. Catherine Mercer's involvement unravels faster. News vans arrive at her Bel Air estate by evening, reporters screaming questions. Her society friends drop her within hours. Her husband files for divorce by midnight. Her publicist abandons her by morning. But Giovanni is not finished. Marchetti collapses to his knees in the rain, his expensive suit soaked with mud and rainwater and desperation. Please, I did not know she was connected to you. I will drop the foreclosure. She can have the building. Please. Giovanni stares at him without the slightest flicker of mercy. Too quick. Too easy. Too merciful. He gestures to Vinny and Sal. They make another phone call. A black van arrives 15 minutes later. The men who exit are not Giovanni's men. Their faces are hard in ways that speak of a different world, a different code. Giovanni explains calmly, his voice like a judge reading a sentence from the bench. There is a family in Tijuana called the Sinaloa Vipers. You sold them contaminated product 5 years ago through a side deal. They have been looking for you. I just told them where you are. Marchetti's face drains of all color. No. No, please. They will kill me. Yes, Giovanni says simply. They will. But not quickly. Marchetti is dragged into the van screaming, his voice echoing off the buildings, bouncing across wet pavement, fading into rain and distance and a future no one will ever see. The van pulls away, and he is gone, Not dead yet, but gone, which is almost worse. Catherine Mercer is arrested at her home on 40 federal charges. Her face appears on every news channel beside the phrase predatory real estate scheme. Her bail is set at $5 million. Her accounts are frozen. When the sentencing comes, the judge hands down 40 years in federal prison. She will be 72 years old when she is released, if she survives that long. Giovanni turns back to Cassandra, and in his hands he holds two documents. The first is the deed to her building. Fully paid. No liens, no debts, no signatures required but hers. The second is a check for $20,000. 6 months of expenses. A bridge to tomorrow. Cassandra stares at them, unable to move, unable to breathe. I cannot pay you back. Giovanni places the documents in her hands. You gave my son his voice back. You made him smile for the first time in 6 months. You stood in the rain with your face beaten and still reached for a child's hand. He pauses, his dark eyes holding hers. There is no currency in this world that can pay for that. No amount of money. No debt that could ever balance. The rain begins to soften. The sky above starts to shift, just barely, toward something lighter. What happens now? Cassandra asks. Giovanni takes her hand. Now you go home. To the building your mother loved. To the life you have been fighting for. And you know that you are never alone in that fight again. Cassandra feels the weight of his promise settle into her bones like warmth returning to frozen ground. She is no longer running. She is no longer invisible. She has been chosen by a man whose power could crush mountains, and that choice means everything. 2 weeks later, the rain has stopped. Los Angeles spreads beneath a sky that remembers how to be blue. Cassandra stands in the lobby of her mother's building, the Riverside Arms, 1952, red brick with tall windows that catch the morning light like opened hands. The smell of fresh paint hangs in the air, cutting through the old scent of mold that lived here for so long. Her fingers trace the newly restored mahogany trim, and her eyes move across the marble floor, now clean, no longer cracked. Giovanni's contractors finished everything. The roof holds. The plumbing works. The electrical system no longer threatens fire. She could rent these apartments. She could fill them with families who need what she needed, a place to sleep, a place to stop running. But she does not need to decide that today. Today is only about standing here, breathing, knowing that this building belongs to her in ways that cannot be taken back. The elevator doors open behind her. Footsteps. Quick, light, unmistakably young. Oliver appears, still in his school uniform, navy blazer, grey pants, his dark hair combed with precision by someone who loves him. He is 7 years old now, though some days he seems older. The rain taught him something about fragility that children should not understand. But the rain also taught him about rescue. About answered signals. Cassandra. He stands at the edge of the marble floor, and his voice carries something careful. Something that asks permission. Are you looking at your building? She turns to him. I am. Mama always said this place was beautiful. His eyes move across the lobby the way hers did, cataloguing, remembering. She said it had bones. Good bones. Bones do not break easy. Cassandra closes her eyes. The mention of her mother, his nonna, though he never knew her, still cuts. But it cuts differently now. Less like a knife and more like a scar being touched in cold weather. Something that aches but also reminds you that you survived. Your mother was right. Cassandra reaches out her hand. Come. I want to show you something. Oliver takes her hand without hesitation. This is their pattern now, established in the guest room of Giovanni's house over 2 weeks of mornings, of homework at the kitchen table, of her correcting him when he calls her mama, and him looking at her with those serious dark eyes, the same eyes as his father, and saying, "You came when I called." That is what mamas do. She had stopped correcting him after 3 days. They climb the stairs instead of taking the restored elevator. Cassandra wants to feel the building around her, to know its weight. They reach the 3rd floor, and she unlocks apartment 312. The space is empty, furniture donated, sold, or left behind by the previous tenant who could not keep up with Marchetti's inflated rent. But the windows are uncovered, and light pours through them like something alive. Cassandra had never been inside this apartment before. She had only cleaned hallways, carried trash, made herself invisible. But now she opens the door to her own building and stands in someone else's empty home, and that feels like power. "What do you see?" she asks Oliver. He walks to the window, presses his small palms against the glass. "I see people. Lots of people. Walking. Some are happy. Some are sad. Some look like they do not know where to go." "Yes." Cassandra comes to stand beside him. "This city has many people who are lost." Oliver is quiet for a moment. "Then, will you help them? Like you helped me?" The question splits her open. She had not let herself think about it. Had not let herself imagine that her survival could become something purposeful, something larger than just existing in Giovanni's guest room and helping with Oliver's homework and standing on his balcony at night, breathing Los Angeles air and still not quite believing she is safe. "I think I will," she says. That night, Giovanni comes home from a meeting downtown. The sun is setting, orange and violent, the way Los Angeles sunsets are, like the city is on fire and does not mind. Cassandra is at the kitchen table with Oliver, a math worksheet between them. She is pointing to a problem. "This number here, you see? It is lonely. It needs a friend. What number would want to be its friend?" Oliver concentrates, his small finger moving across the paper. "The number 6. Because 6 is nice. The number 6 would want to be friends with lonely number 4. Cassandra tries not to smile. "That is not how mathematics works, Oliver." "But it is how friendship works," he says, certain as stone. Giovanni stands in the kitchen doorway, watching. Vinny is behind him, and Sal, both still in their dark suits, both looking like men who have spent the day doing things that do not bear examination. But their eyes are on the scene at the table, the woman and the child bent over numbers, the lamplight catching in her dark hair, Oliver's face bright with concentration, and something that might be called joy. Giovanni dismisses them with a nod. They withdraw to the hallway, and Sal mutters something to Vinny. Cassandra catches only the tone, surprise, something like relief. "When is the last time you saw him smile?" Sal says. Vinny shakes his head. "I do not think I have ever seen it." Giovanni approaches the table. He is still in his suit jacket, expensive Italian wool that cost more than Cassandra earned in a year of double shifts. His shirt is open at the throat, showing the strong line of his neck, the faint outline of a scar that runs from collarbone to ribs, a reminder of a world he survived before Oliver was born, before she pulled his son out of the rain. "Hello," he says to Oliver. "Papa." Oliver looks up, and something shifts in his face. The joy does not disappear, but it becomes careful, controlled, as though he is remembering that his father is a man who commands fear in other men. "We are making friends with numbers." Giovanni pulls out a chair and sits, his long frame folding into the space beside Cassandra. She does not move away. 2 weeks ago, she would have. 2 weeks ago, she would have given up her seat, stood in the corner, made herself small. But Giovanni has taught her something without words: belonging is not something you earn. It is something you choose, every single morning. "What is this number?" Giovanni points to the worksheet. "The lonely one." "4," Oliver says. "Then we need a partner for 4. Giovanni glances at Cassandra. Their eyes meet for a fraction of a second, long enough for her to see something raw in his expression, something that looks like hope and terror mixed together. I believe Cassandra already explained this, did she not? She said it is mathematics, Oliver says. But I said it is friendship. And she stopped arguing. Giovanni's mouth curves. Not a smile exactly, but something approaching one. A man unlearning the habit of hardness. Then perhaps Cassandra was right to stop arguing. Later, after Oliver is asleep, after she has tucked him into bed, read him a story about a boy who learned to speak to dolphins, waited for his breathing to deepen into the rhythm of safety, Giovanni finds her on the guest room balcony. The night is cool, the kind of night that reminds you Los Angeles is a desert that learned to wear a city like a disguise. The lights stretch in every direction, and somewhere down there, Anthony Marchetti is gone, and Catherine Mercer is in a federal prison cell, and Cassandra Pierce is standing on a balcony in a home that is not hers but is beginning to feel like it might be. You could stay, Giovanni says. He does not frame it as a question. Not in the guest room. In a room of your own. A permanent room. Oliver needs stability. He needs someone. He has you, she says. He does. Giovanni moves to stand beside her, and the distance between them feels deliberately chosen, deliberately maintained. But he also needs you. I have seen what you do. How you make him talk about his feelings instead of hiding them. How you help him build words out of silence. That is not something I can give him. That is your gift. Cassandra watches the city lights. She can see the building where she lived before, the shelter, the converted motel, the series of temporary places where she had learned that permanence was a luxury for people who had already survived. She can see the direction of where Marchetti's office used to be, before Giovanni's men dismantled it, before every document was turned over to federal investigators, before the empire built on other people's suffering collapsed into ash and federal charges. I think I want more than just to be protected, she says quietly. I think I want to belong in a way that is not temporary. Not something that depends on Oliver needing me. I want to be here because someone chose me. Not because I am useful. Giovanni is quiet. The city hums, traffic, distance, the sound of Los Angeles breathing in the dark. Then belong, he says finally. You already do. You have since the moment Oliver took your hand in the rain. Since you answered his signal when everyone else was looking away. Since you stood here, alive, refusing to disappear. That is not temporary. That is choice. And I choose it every single morning, and I will choose it tomorrow, and the morning after that, for as long as you will let me. Cassandra does not cry. She has learned that tears are a luxury she is not finished earning. But she feels something settle in her chest, something like the weight of roots growing down into solid ground, something like the beginning of home. Then I choose it too, she says. The city lights stretch around them, and neither of them moves, and the silence is full of a kind of peace that feels like its own form of rescue. Christmas Eve arrives like a blessing nobody dares speak aloud. Giovanni's home is transformed, garland along the staircase, lights wound through the railings like captured stars, the smell of rosemary and basil and cinnamon mixing in the air. Cassandra wears a simple red dress, the kind of dress she could never have afforded before, the kind that makes her feel like someone worth looking at. Oliver has helped decorate, his small hands placing ornaments on the tree, his voice singing along to Italian songs Giovanni plays, songs about family, about coming home, about the kind of love that does not break when tested. The dining table is set for 3. Real plates, real silver, real crystal glasses that catch the candlelight. Food, fresh pasta, roasted vegetables, the kind of meal that takes hours to prepare and requires someone who knows how to do it. Giovanni cooked most of it himself, with Oliver stationed on a stool beside him, passing ingredients, tasting, learning that making something with your hands for people you love is different than any other kind of work. They sit. Oliver in the middle, because he insisted, his small frame between 2 adults who have learned to be gentle with him and with each other. He reaches for both their hands. His prayer is simple and devastating. Thank you for Mama coming back. Thank you for Papa smiling again. Thank you for our family. Cassandra's eyes overflow. She does not stop them this time. She lets the tears fall, lets them land on the white tablecloth, lets them be evidence of a heart that is learning how to hope again. Giovanni reaches across the table, covers her hand with his, a gesture so small it should not matter, but it matters. It matters because his hands are warm, and she is not cold anymore. After Oliver falls asleep, after she has tucked him under his covers, kissed his forehead, whispered thank you to a child who saved a broken woman simply by being brave enough to call for help, Cassandra finds Giovanni on the balcony. The city below them glitters, and the December air is sharp and clean. I was homeless, she says, not because he does not know but because saying it aloud feels like claiming it, like refusing to let it stay hidden. I had $2 in my pocket. I was about to lose the building my mother built with her own hands. I thought I was going to die alone in the rain, and nobody would notice because I was already invisible. Giovanni does not answer immediately. He is looking at the city, and she can see his profile, strong, scarred, changed by years of being someone other people feared. But his expression is soft in a way she has never seen it before, soft the way a fortress looks in winter when the snow covers the stones and you can almost forget how many things died inside those walls. You gave my son his voice back, he says finally. You made him understand that when you call for help, someone can answer. That the world is not only cruelty. That there are people who will stand in the rain with a broken body and still reach for a child's hand. He turns to look at her, and his eyes are dark and certain. That is not invisible. That is the most visible, most powerful thing I have ever witnessed. He kisses her then, not urgently, not desperately, but with intention, the way someone who has learned patience kisses someone they plan to keep. His hands find her face, gentle, as if she is still breakable, still something that requires careful handling. She lets him. She lets him hold her like she matters. Like she is not a temporary resident in someone else's home, but a chosen thing, a kept thing, a loved thing. What happens now, she asks when they finally separate. Now you live, Giovanni says. You build something with your mother's building. You help the people who are where you were. You be the mother Oliver already calls you. You be the person I wake up next to. You be the reason my men stop looking surprised when I smile. You be everything you already are, just without running. Cassandra looks at the city, all those lights, all those people, all those stories intersecting and burning and rebuilding themselves in the dark. She thinks of the building on Riverside, empty and waiting. She thinks of families who need what she needed. She thinks of a little boy who answered a signal in the rain. She thinks of a man who chose her when his entire world told him not to. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, she says softly. Only love can do that. Giovanni takes her hand. Yes. Exactly that. If this story moved you, if this journey from survival to belonging touched something in your heart, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who is still standing in the rain, someone who needs to know that answered signals lead to rescue. Subscribe because tomorrow we are bringing you another story of love, power, and second chances that will stay with you long after the sun sets. And in the comments below, tell us, have you ever been the person who answered the signal, or the person brave enough to give it? Have you ever known what it felt like to be chosen, really chosen, by someone who could destroy you but chose to save you instead? We want to hear your story. Remember, no matter how broken the night seems, no matter how small your signal, there is always someone listening. There is always the possibility of rescue, of belonging, of home. That is the promise this story makes. That is the truth we all need to hold on to. Thank you for staying with us. We will see you in the next story. Goodbye.